Welcome to Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I'm Brandon Strange. He's Joel Blank of ESPN Houston's Press Box. Joel, welcome in. The biggest Rockets news of the week so far was the addition of DeMarcus Cousins. Joel, I think most fans see this as the lowest possible risk with a really, really high upside. Injury history, yes, but when Boogie's right, he's definitely one of the best bigs in the games. So now you have two bigs that can shoot and dribble. They still don't have any rim protection, but really didn't lose any. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, just quickly give me some of your thoughts about this signing and what you're gleaning from Rafael Stone's early moves.
I love it. I mean, of the other moves I've been critical of with Rafael Stone, especially because of the protections that go around the first-round picks and the way he traded his way into and then out of a first-round draft pick that probably could have helped. I love Boogie Cousins, and I said that if he got Boogie Cousins and took the risk, I'd be willing to give him the reward and saying he did a great job because it's a non-guaranteed contract. And you mentioned the injuries. That's a concern. Also, between his ears, he's been known to be able to go off on teammates, coaches, organizational staff, and that could be a concern. But it doesn't cost you anything to get rid of him, and it doesn't cost you a whole lot to bring him in at the veterans minimum. And he's a former all-star center that averaged a double-double, that was the most talented offensive center in the game until two devastating injuries took him out of basketball the last 2 years. With all that being said, they've said he's lighter. He's in better shape than he's ever been, that he's been running the floor. He seems to be very focused and engaged. If the Rockets get that kind of Boogie Cousins, even if he's not the player he once was, because you mentioned he's not a rim protector, but he rebounds and he guards the low block. He's got a big body that can guard guys on the post, which Christian Wood can't do. So you got Christian Wood who can block some shots, and you've got Boogie Cousins who definitely can defend the low post. So you've upgraded from small ball to two serviceable bigs that help your roster going forward.
I want to bring James Harden into the conversation because I think he's a very important element here. What do you think the Boogie signing means, if anything, for the Rockets and James Harden's status on this team? Does he know something we don't?
I think, Brandon, we take it a step further. It's not just James Harden, it's Russell Westbrook, because both have asked for trades, depending on what you read, and both would like to be elsewhere. But I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they hired a first-time general manager that no one believes has the basketball acumen to be able to do what they need to do to compete for a title. They hired a first-time head coach, so there's no real history that says this is a championship caliber coach. The moves they've made so far have been to save money and not add to the roster. In fact, they got rid of one of their starters last year in Robert Covington. This is the first move that I think entices both James Harden and Russell Westbrook to press the pause button and look at this and say, hey, the first time Boogie Cousins got hurt 2 years ago, he was playing for the Pelicans against the Rockets. He had 20-some-odd points, 12 or 14 rebounds, and was killing it, as you mentioned, shooting from outside and inside and all over the floor. If they get remnants of that, if they get a guy that is focused and determined, and they suddenly have, for little to no money and commitment at all, have added an all-star caliber center to their two all-star resumes, and you can add some pieces that you still have around them, like Eric Gordon, like some of the guys you still have on the roster, like PJ Tucker, your rotation, and on paper, your roster says you're a playoff team. So I think for a lot of reasons, I think for both James Harden and Russell Westbrook, Boogie Cousins can be a guy that makes them want to stay in Houston.
It's interesting you bring that up because I want to drill into that and kind of what the implications, the further implications of Boogie Cousins signing in Houston has on James Harden and Russell Westbrook's status here. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a word from Fitz Roofing?
We love people at Fitz Roofing. They're loyal to Houstonians, and therefore they're going to give you the best deals, the best prices, but more importantly, the best warranties and the best products on the market and the best ratings overall. They do everything for you, including a free no-obligation inspection. All you got to do is call them, 832-521-3001. They come to you, they tell you what they can do, and it costs you nothing. If you want them to come back, they will, and they'll do fantastic work every time. It's Fitz Roofing, making a difference one home at a time.
If the team does get off to a quick start, maybe Silas makes a good impression, what are the chances that James Harden looks at this team and says, okay, maybe we can make a run at this. Maybe the rumors die down. Or does he keep looking up at LeBron and AD and say, no, those guys just only got better during the offseason. I probably still need to be in the East. What do you think about that?
James believes that his whole legacy and getting to erasing a lot of the negativity that surrounds his career is centered around his playoff failures and the fact that he doesn't have a championship. If he truly just wants to ride this thing out with a good team that could get better with an offensive-minded coach like Silas, I think you see a lot about James Harden's maturity level. So a lot will be said about James Harden, because so far we've heard a ton from James Harden's camp in terms of he wants out, where he wants to play, and the fact that if they don't have a chance to win a title, he doesn't want to be a part of it, and they didn't check with him enough. Russell Westbrook hasn't said a whole lot, and when he has said anything, he said when they brought Van Gundy in, he was there. He flew in. He took the time to listen so that the Rockets could get the right coach. I could see Russ staying and being really good with this if Boogie starts playing well, if Eric Gordon shoots the ball well, if their team gets off to, like you said, a hot start. James is a different animal, and James is a totally different situation. I'm curious to see how James Harden handles it if they do get off to a good start, because it'll say a lot more about James Harden than it will about this franchise.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I guess if considering that we've heard from Woj saying that the Rockets aren't in any real meaningful trade conversations right now about James Harden. They're definitely trying to shop Russ from what we hear, but there's no takers. So there's a high likelihood that this team is what the team looks like when the ball gets tipped off at the beginning of the season. So do you think that a guy like Rafael Stone, who is new in that GM role, do you think that he can shepherd this roster, continue to make it better to where James and Russ can compete with the ADs and LeBrons of the West?
It's $1 million question, Brandon. Honestly, in terms of from Rafael Stone being an inexperienced first-time general manager, I don't have any confidence that he can. But they have too many big salaries to move in order to get impactful players that add the kind of supporting cast the Lakers have added this offseason, and the creativity from a general manager like Rob Pelinka, who shifted pieces and draft picks, which the Rockets don't have, to get better than they were a year ago. I think the fact that you were able to unload Robert Covington but didn't get anything in return like you had hoped for is a very telltale sign in terms of the Rockets having a lot of money tied up in a lot of contracts that limit you in making a deep roster. So therefore, all you can do is make a deep rotation, the best rotation you possibly can. And right now, because of the addition to Cousins, assuming he's healthy, you can probably go 7 deep. You lost real valuable pieces in Jeff Green and Austin Rivers. You got to try and replace those pieces, and you got an owner that doesn't want to go over the luxury tax. So again, a lot will be said about how far this team can go and how good they can get for both James Harden, the city of Houston, and the fan base based on who they can add as supporting cast members between now and the start of the season. I don't know how many veterans minimum players are going to want to come here, and I don't know how many they can entice with Rafael Stone to get here. But if they can get a couple, they don't need that many. Milwaukee's proven you don't have to be 1 through 15 deep. It's more important to be 1 through 7 or 8 deep, and you can make a run. I think if they get 1 or 2 more pieces, I think they could be in a position a lot better than people have thought, but that's going to be a big challenge for a first-time general manager.